I made the decision we were going to do that on the Friday. I literally spent all weekend on Squarespace, I think it was, making a website. And then on the Monday morning, I'm faced with a website that launched the night before. And then I just started ringing people. And I just started ringing people that I'd come into contact with over the years. And I think that's where I started to talk about our values. The matchup in values is where it works. Once you get an understanding of that, and that you have a place in this world to deliver what you are delivering, your clients will find you and you will grow. It's not all about the transactional stuff. And I try and share that with people as much as possible. I run an agency with my wife, Kate. We run Shed Social, and we are a Facebook and Instagram ads specialist agency. And we're based in Cardiff in the UK. And we've been doing it since 2015 and came to, I suppose, entrepreneurialism, if that's a word, entrepreneurialism a little later than some people. I was 49 now. So I'd had a career in media, in sort of corporate world before I started sort of thinking about opening a business, running a business. And so I came to it a little bit late. But yeah, so that's where it started. And my career in radio, which is predominantly where my background was in the commercial side of radio, and 20 years working in, huge corporate giants in the UK, and loved every minute, met some great people, still like friends for life, and really enjoyed it. And by the time I was sort of thinking about doing something different, I was right at the top of that game, if you like. I was working for the largest corporate sort of group of radio stations in the UK. And I was probably one of the top salespeople working for the company. We were just, I was just generating millions of pounds for the business every month. And it was, great job, but it was a job. And I always had this sort of sense of feeling that I'm doing this for somebody else and I'm only getting a really small cut of it. So it was always that sort of, should I try something else? And that sort of, I suppose, combined with corporate world, it was very much focused on, lots of different things about how to succeed, but just being good at your job was never enough to sort of climb the ladder, I guess. It's a world that's very focused on politics and just really that side of the role in the corporate world. I didn't enjoy it. I suppose I wasn't that great at it, but I certainly didn't enjoy it more than anything else. I was just more focused about doing a really good job. And I just got to the point where I thought there's got to be more to this, more fulfilling, more enjoyable, more sort of a personal journey. And that's when the thoughts of setting up on our own started to come into play, really. Yeah.
I've heard that a lot. And I've experienced a bit of that as well like, I'm doing a great job. I'm happy and proud of the work that I'm producing, but if there's always just something more, and it's not a fully merit-based game where if it was just the best of the best get to the top and get everything that you want, it'd probably be a whole different landscape. But often there's, it's fascinating seeing companies that you feel like aren't acting in their own best interest and almost self-sabotaging themselves because some people's agendas are very different than the companies, or even the people at the very top. You're like, are you trying to grow this company? Are you trying to make this as good as it can be? Or are you using this for some ulterior motive? Maybe it's just to self-serve. Maybe it's to just, who knows what that is. But it's funny how a lot of times that can be very backwards in what should be a for-profit business and a business that should be serving customers and shareholders and employees and things like that. I find it interesting. Well, and where you're at now with, you've niched down, which I saw we were talking about that, or we've talked about your growth there, but kind of like we're kind of skipping ahead, and we'll go back and touch on some of that. I do want to hear about that transition, but you're now like 5 years in, or did I have it written down?
So we started the agency in 2015, and that was
Okay.
so we started the agency, and when we started, it was a kind of forced in some ways, because I'd left corporate world and I was working for another agency, an ad agency. And it was always that sort of challenge of going from a corporate to a much smaller business and picking the right one. And I suppose that's where I started to get a good learn from that is more about values and, your morals, I suppose. And for me, that was really important. And I went to this company believing that we had shared values, and we did a deal. So I wasn't really looking for a job, but they'd approached me to come and work for them. I looked after them as a client in the radio station and the radio group, and they asked me to come across. And I said to them, listen, I'm interested in a conversation, but I've got a great job. I don't want a job, but what I'm interested in is that sort of next level, that sort of being able to steer the ship a little bit, have some input into the direction of the company, and I'd like part ownership. So we did a great deal where there was a revenue target placed, right, bringing this much profit over the first 12 months, and we'll allocate a percentage of the company to you, and we can start that process of bringing you in as one of the owners. And anyway, absolutely smashed the targets and brought in, millions of pounds over the first 18 months. And the agency owners just turned around and said, well, we really like what you've done, but we don't want to give up any part of the agency. So you can have a pay rise. But it was like, okay, that's not why I came here, So we ended up falling out over it. And at that point, it was that kind of, well, let's just do it ourselves. And that point of stepping off that cliff to say, let's do it. Sometimes it's just, give people the impetus, or just take the bull by the horns and just start. And literally we just started. And on the first day, I've got a picture somewhere, which is just a picture of us in our spare room with a desk and a laptop on the desk and my mobile phone. And that was it. I didn't have anything else. It was just, let's get on the phones, because I've got to make the mortgage at the end of the month. So it just literally started there. So the agency to begin with was a lot more broad service. So we would offer, web build, all different things that I would work with partners with. And then pretty quickly we started to niche down into just offering Facebook ads, because we were getting really good traction with the Facebook ads we were doing. So so we started off broader in 2015, niched down into Facebook ads probably a couple of years later on. And then over the last few years, we've really sort of, I suppose, niched down and got our heads into gear and started to properly grow and have a proper strategy. And we are where we are today.
Oh, that's awesome. And it's a bummer to hear, because it's like you went from that big corporate place and then going to a smaller startup where you're like, this is a better opportunity. This is where I'm at. And then almost like having the carpet pulled out from under you of like, wait, like we agreed on this, like I made you a lot of money. And it's almost like you're kind of back in that same position. But I'm curious, like, what were those first couple weeks of when, and if I'm summarizing right, I mean, you were in the radio for years and years. One of those clients pulled you, offers you a great job. And then you're like, I'm tired of working from somebody else. I've got goals and ambitions that I'm wanting to accomplish. And you attempted that with that second agency. Well, so now you're kind of facing, well, I'm just going to do this all myself. But what was that? What were those first few weeks or months like?
It was interesting. It was interesting. So we were quite lucky. So I sort of, we were starting from, or I was starting from scratch in terms of what I did in the sort of 18 months I was with the agency. I'd learned a lot about, lots of elements of services that agency provide, whether it's design, print, media buying, web design. I've learned enough to be able to have conversations with people, and then be able to bring on board partners or contractors to be able to deliver those services and be able to talk confidently with them to be able to make sure they're doing a good job. But those first few weeks, it was a case of, right, I've got literally we're I was falling out with the agency, and we, agreed at some point, although it was all contracted, we agreed that the only winner was going to be the solicitors or the lawyers, because it was going to go to court. So we just, for my own benefit, I just had to draw a line under it from a mental perspective, because everything was it was very all consuming and very negative. And I just needed to draw a line under it to be able to move on and do the next thing. So I made the decision we were going to do that on the Friday. I literally spent all weekend on Squarespace, I think it was, making a website. And then on the Monday morning, I'm faced with a website that launched the night before. And then I just started ringing people. And I just started ringing people that I'd come into contact with over the years, whether it was in radio or whether it was at the agency, and just telling them that, this is what I'm doing, and this is what we're hoping to do with the agency. And I think that's where I started to talk about our values. And I think that probably got us in a few doors more than if I just trying to sell and pitch to people. I just literally explained that, we're all about, as my career had all been about integrity and transparency and honesty with people. And, the corporate world can be a bit dog eat dog. And, like you mentioned, that sort of one-upmanship, that people have different agendas. And then, to go from that to my experience of the agency, where I've got a little screwed over, to be perfectly frank. It was just felt like I wanted to prove that you could be successful in business and just be a decent human being as well. And just be a person that, you would look at yourself and be proud of that person, I guess, and be a decent human being and treat people with respect and operate with transparency and honesty and integrity. And things don't always have to go right, but they always have to be, upfront with the client about it, and treat people, I guess, as you'd like to be treated. So I just started ringing people and talking to them about why we'd set up and why I was calling them, and what it was about the company that I wanted to share with them about the values. And literally within the first week, I think the first order I picked up was a big print document, which was, I hadn't really done much print. I'd done, so I got a couple of designers I knew. So I spoke to one of those designers, and they helped me, put it all together. And it was a document for in the healthcare industry. And it was all about it was about particular disease prevention. So it had to be really accurate. And we got the deal done, and it was great. And we got the first product back delivered to the client within a couple of weeks. Good turnaround, all ready to go to print, and then we sent off to print, and it was all good. But it was literally a case of just cold going out there, ringing people, going to as many networking breakfasts and things like that as possible, and just and where we live here in Wales. So we're in Cardiff, which is Wales, which is the Principality of the UK. It's a very socially linked business world. So you have to be out there regularly, talking to people. And of course, we were at the very beginning, and I had a number of contacts, but they weren't particularly based in Wales. We'd only fairly recently moved here, so it was a tough job. But we just took step by step and started to grow. And we were lucky that we already had the name Shed Marketing, because Kate, my wife, was doing some consultancy as a sort of freelance consultant under the name. So we had the name, we had a bank account, we had, some sort of credit lines and things like that. So that was already established. But, on that first week of setting up the wider agency, or first few weeks, it was pretty tough on the phone. You got a lot of no's.
Yeah.
But
that's interesting. It seems like you came to that realization pretty quick of, I'm going to talk about what I do, but I'm also going to talk about my values and what I believe. And was there, what was the intention behind that? Or was that kind of like, I'm tired of just talking to people and telling them what I do? On the surface level, I want to tell them why I'm doing it and share values. And then was there ever an aha moment where you're like, oh man, the last 3-4 calls I did where I talked about my values, they went way better. Maybe not all of them closed, maybe none of them closed, but did you have that moment where you're like, maybe I should start doing this more?
Do you know, it wasn't a strategy that I'd come up with. I hadn't sat there and thought, right, I'm going to use this to get in the door.
Yeah.
But I think when I got when I got screwed over by the agency, it really hurt. It really hurt, you know, and it knocked my confidence, and I just felt like inside I was raging that they'd done that, but also that they were willing to do it, and that they were just, you know, happy to just do that. And it just really struck a chord with me that I'm never going to be like that. So it was a massive learn. And, you know, as much as it really hurt at the time, the number of things I learned from the experience, not only the sort of technical, or how to do this, how to do that, this is how we do, you know, print or media buying and just the technicalities, but the how to run a business and how to treat people is, bless you, is really, you know, that's what came across as that's what I'm going to take away from this experience. And when I started ringing people, it just felt like a very natural thing to do, because, you know, some of them were people that I know had dealt with that previous agency or dealt with other people. And I just thought, well, they're no longer there. There might be a reason for that. I'm just going to talk from the heart a little bit and tell them, this is how I'm feeling. This is why I'm setting up this business. And if you've got shared values, then it might be we have a conversation at some point, you know.
Yeah, I fully believe in that. If you can link up core value to core value, if that happens first, everything that comes after is going to just be that much more simple. And it's easy to dismiss it like, well, that's not like the best way to do a sales call, or that's not the best way to lead or prospect with folks. But no, if you're cold calling, most of your stuff isn't going to work out anyway. It's that numbers game. So it's like, well, why not start with who you are? Because you're gonna have to get to that point anyway. And it's just like, hey, this is who I am. This is what I believe.
Yeah.
If that's cool with you, we can keep going.
I don't really remember, to be honest, if it was like this, but I certainly know that all the cold calls I was doing, those people are getting lots of cold calls. And if I can do something that's a bit different to make that call stand out, then you've got a much better chance of just, you know, you've only got a few seconds to create that first impression, haven't you? And that to keep that conversation, because once you've got a conversation going, then you've got a much better opportunity to decide if, you know, the person you're talking to is someone that you warm to, and vice versa. So you've got a better chance of, you know, meeting for a coffee to discuss whatever it is in more detail. And, you know, so, you know, that's just how it worked out. I can't really sit here and say, oh, that was my plan all along, you know.
Yeah. But I think you kind of get to, when you get to that point where you're like, you know what, let me throw out the playbook, and this is how I'm going to be. I mean, there's something to that. Just being like, that is like the true authenticity that people can fake on LinkedIn, can fake on Instagram. But when you're doing that, it's almost, it's so powerful. You can't quantify it, but also just makes you feel better. It's like, I know that I'm doing everything that I can that's with how I want to be and operate in this world, professionally and personally.
Yeah.
And I found that just time and time again, that's where things become easy. And especially once it sounds like, you know, as you kind of get into that point of, okay, now you've kind of broken into the business scene of Wales, you know, things get faster and easier as you kind of move up in your business. Of course, whole new problems arise, but when you're 4 or 5 years into the business, revenue hopefully is no longer an issue at all. Then your other issues are employees, HR, hiring, accounting, things like that. But if you're operating from that place of value, you'll hire the right people. They'll stick around. The right ones will stick around. The wrong ones will naturally leave. And it's that everyone wants that fast path to success. Hey, here's how you can start an agency without cold calling, without doing anything, and you can make 6 figures a month. People want that, but it's like, that ain't gonna happen. If you take the slightly slower route, it's going to be far more sustainable and better, I think.
with that, and I see those all the time, that sort of, this is how to start an agency, and,
Yeah.
no cold calling, no networking, but within by next Thursday, you'll be doing six figures. It's easy, and I definitely think how that translates to my business now, when I'm talking to people on the phone, to be able to share some of my backstory and my journey and the why we do things the way we do, allows me to connect with so many more people. It just and that sort of the values of honesty and transparency and leading with that as a sort of, this is our proposition. Then when there is a reason behind it, that you can put some meat on the bones and talk about, well, we've done this and we've done this, and that's why we've become who we are, then that's where we start to see more connections in terms of values. And I think when we had the broader service agency, we were sort of in two minds, because our strategy was to just do more and more and try and grow, and that sort of brought with it its problems, because we didn't really know who to hire next. Was it a web developer? Was it a graphic designer? Or who did we hire next? It felt like the agency was growing, but it didn't feel like we were experts in any one thing. We were good. We were really good at lots of things, but we weren't really famous for one thing. And I think so we were toying with the idea anyway, because we were getting really good traction with the Facebook ads. That was working really, really well. And I'd been, through my sales techniques, I guess, I literally knocked on the door of this business. I'd gone and pulled up outside. I thought, they look like a business we can help. I'd gone in 2 or 3 times trying to find the person I needed to talk to, the head of marketing, head of engagement. And on the 3rd time of going in, this guy came down and he said, I know you've been in a couple of times, so let's have a chat. So we went and had a coffee, and we were sort of talking about what we did. And he was saying, okay, well, it's quite opportune, because we're looking for a new website. Fantastic. So we started talking about what his needs were. And that conversation started to stretch over a number of weeks in terms of identifying what sort of website he needed, who was it for. And we started to start taking a brief and getting an idea of who their clients, who their customers were. And that process started to elongate over quite a long time. And then the guy came back after about 6 months, and he said, listen, we know what we want now. Really appreciate all the effort you've put in to get to this point. We know exactly what we want, but the sort of business we are, we have to put it out to tender. So I was like, okay, is there any way we can get around this? I've been working on this for 6 months. No, it's got to go out to tender. Okay, fair enough. So us and 2 other agencies pitched for the new website, and we went along there, and we had a really good proposition, but we didn't win it, and it went to a specialist web design agency. And that was a real sort of shot across the bow to say, right, okay, we do need to change our strategy, because those guys are famous for doing great websites, and we're known for doing really good stuff, but there wasn't one thing you can hang your hat on that we're great at. So combine that with, we were getting lots of traction and success with the Facebook ads we were running, we decided to sort of niche down into just doing Facebook ads. And that is funny, because the approach we made to that guy, we've made a real connection. But his process at his end meant that it had to go out to tender, and we just didn't win it. And it was really hard, but it was a really good learn. It was a really good learn.
I'm curious, do you still have a relationship with that guy? Do y'all ever talk? Has he ever sent you any business?
Well, we don't really, not that we've fallen out, but the nature of their business is, it was a housing association. So in the UK, we have lots of housing associations where it's kind of where people who are on some sort of benefits from the government, or on some sort of, they can go and get free or reduced cost housing. So they can live somewhere nice, but they don't have to pay full price for it. But because of the number of sort of applications, they don't need any lead generation or anything like that, because it's all managed through the local government and local authority. So as we've sort of transitioned into an agency that uses, specializes in Facebook, they don't need it, because so we don't really talk, and we certainly haven't spoken for a couple of years over various lockdowns and pandemics and things like that. But yeah, we never got the opportunity to get any business from them after that. So
well, I mean, I believe that nothing is ever wasted. I'm curious, like, again, the unquantifiable and just operating in your zone of, say, zone of, I guess, expertise, or even like your zone of moral values and well, values in general, integrity and all the things that you talked about, that you don't know how many people that guy may have spoken to is like, man, that Matt guy, he's a good dude. He didn't get the thing, and here's why, whatever. And I don't know. I just believe that. And that's, I mean, I want to tie that to the theme of what you're talking about, of operating from your core values. It's like, all right, well, I didn't get it, but I've got a guy that knows my integrity and who I'm about.
Yeah.
And that's a win, because there's no way that someone can interact with someone for any long period of time where they don't like true colors come out. People cannot hide who they are for that long. And I think and good people know that.
Yeah. And you know what? It was a good experience, and it actually helped to accelerate the growth and the strategy of as we niche down in the agency. So we don't regret any part of it, and I might give him a call, actually. I haven't spoken to him for a long time. I might give him a call. You never know, how he's doing, or who might know. But like you say, these people, they pop up, don't they? And they know people, and they connect with other businesses. And
yeah, so, I've had that. It was something I was thinking of, like people that I had networked with, like second, third degree connections of like friends of a friends of a friends. Like earlier on, like a lot of times the last person I expected to send me a referral.
Yes.
Then I was like, this is a person I just met for coffee one day, and we talked business, and I was like, hey, I'm just starting out, like, just want to tell you kind of what I'm doing and learn more about you. Sometimes good stuff comes from that. I mean, and most of it, maybe not, but it's still a chance to just share who you are and what you do and all that. So one thing I'm curious on, like, you say you've got 10 team members, and where you're at now across the globe. So, I mean, really from kind of where we're at, maybe if we're ending that story of the web, contract, for lack of a better word, that didn't go your way, but then it forced you to niche down. So at what point, it seemed like that was kind of a turning point to then be a catalyst to niche into Facebook ads where you're now running. And then over what period of time did you suddenly look around and be like, oh my God, I got 10 people on my team, and we're kind of across multiple continents potentially?
Well, that's come from, so 2 years ago, just over 2 years ago now, we had, it was myself and Kate, and we had a team member who was kind of a hangover from the previous incarnation of the agency, if you like. And she was a really good writer and happened to be fairly technical as well. So she sort of joined us on the journey of going from, niching down into specializing into Facebook ads. So at that point, there was 3 of us. And then 2 years on now, there are 10 of us. So it's been over the last, that sort of accelerated growth really has been over the last 2 years. Yeah. So
that's incredible.
Yeah. So I think what's helped with that is now when I speak to people, there's a real sort of laser targeted reason why I'm talking to somebody. And the more you focus in on it, the more time we spend every day working on Facebook ads and Instagram and just embroiled in that world, the more of an expert you become. And I think naturally then when you're having conversations with people, that expertise comes across more naturally, rather than having to sort of shout about it from the rooftops and shout about, we can get you 100 ROAS by the end of next week, or whatever, those kind of things. Our expertise comes across in those conversations. But I think probably what's helped to accelerate that growth in that 2-year period is surrounding yourself with the right people. And I think it's really important, if you're in a business or starting a business, but you want to take it to the next level, it's really important. And something we found helped us immensely is to immerse yourself in a world of people around you who have similar values, similar outlook on life, and they're your tribe. And this is kind of how you and I met, you know, through that community of sharing and just having someone to share problems with and to troubleshoot with and also to learn from. That's made the biggest difference, I think, to our strategy and our growth over the last 2 years. And I see that in lots of different ways. But when we're sort of, you know, having conversations about how to shape the structure of your business, or if we're discussing a book that we've enjoyed, or whatever the conversations are, I always try and take away, you know, as much as possible, even if it's just one thing, but just take away something like that, and then make sure you apply it to your business. Because I think, you know, there's lots of opportunity in life and in business to buy the books and to, you know, buy into the sort of 6 habits of successful people before 6 a.m. and all that kind of stuff. But you have to walk the walk as well. You have to read the books. You have to learn from them. You have to, you know, in your tribe, when you find your tribe, you have to contribute and the more you give, the more you get back. And then, you know, but just go into every situation with I can learn something here. And that's what, you know, that has really helped us to develop and grow the strategy and probably accelerate the growth of our business over the last 2 years.
Right. And when you think about like business timelines, I mean, one, if we're saying 2015, the beginning, this 2021, you're still in an early stage. And then 2 years into really shedding all the other stuff you did, like websites design, and just focusing on Facebook, like in a way, you're like just getting started, where if you're thinking of the super short term, like, oh, I need to make X dollars in 6 months or in 1 year, you know, for me, the difference between like the last like 4 to 6 months of year 2 is probably going to be greater than the previous like 18 months, or those last 4 6 months is probably better than, you know, much bigger than your entire first year. So you get those kind of exponential gains, but 2 years is still a short time. It's not, and to get like, yeah, 2 years, when it was 2, maybe 3 of us, now we're at 10 people. And for anyone that's ever hired a person, like you kind of have to know, like you have to hit certain revenue thresholds to be able to pay for these. And knowing like, well, you know, I guess for certain roles, they're like, well, if I maybe sales, they're like, if you're in sales, you should be generating like 10x your salary for the company. But it's, and it's fascinating that you're, I mean, you had mentioned the niching, which helped, but it's almost, it's the values, it's the community and the tribe. You're like, that's the difference. But you would never be able to say like, here's the exact moment. It's just the culmination of everything.
You know, I think it's really hard to say, here's the exact moment, because it's a culmination of things. I think if you try and do something every day or every week, no matter how small, if you try and do something to push the business forward, it's amazing how the cumulative effect of that suddenly starts to build. You know, if you run 1 mile a day, it's not a lot, but it's 365 miles in a year. You know, it's quite a long way when you add it up. And I think that's how this journey has been for me. In the early stages, you know, 2 years ago, what I was dealing with was just trying to look at how we could grow and structure the growth. And lots of people in our industry niche down even further and say, well, our niche is we're Facebook ads, but we only deal with e-commerce, or we only deal with lead generation. And then some people even niche down further than that and say, we do lead generation, but we only do lawyers or solicitors, you know. And I spent a lot of time looking for that niche and saying, well, you know, what do we do that we're really good at? And what do we do that we have really great results at? And there was never a clear winner. actually. And within my tribe, my community, there's definitely been encouragement to say, try this, niche down, do that. It will help you become more of an expert. But I feel like our niche is people who have shared values with us, and that's when I get on the phone to somebody, and because I still do the selling for our business. So when I'm on the phone to a prospect, the biggest thing is, how do we get on? Because we've got in our team, we've got people who specialize in e-commerce, and they're brilliant at e-commerce. And we've got people in the team who specialize in lead generation on Facebook ads, and they're amazing at lead generation. So I believe that if the fit is right, if I get on with the people and they buy into our values and they share similar values, and they want to grow their business in a similar way to how we're growing ours, with integrity and transparency, and they want to be decent human beings as well, then we're a good fit. And the rest we can work, because they're either going to be lead generation or e-commerce. We've got people who are absolutely brilliant at both of those specialities. So the more we go on, that's where I feel our niche is. So as we have accepted that and understood that, then our growth has accelerated again. And you just feel like every day, if you're doing something each month, each day, each week, that contributes towards understanding what your niche is, understanding where you fit, understanding how to grow the business, understanding the processes, understanding every element of your business. If you're pushing the needle forward every day, then it is amazing how far you can come in 2 years, And I'm really excited to see where we can go in the next 2 years. But I think there isn't a pivotal moment. I think it's all of the 2 years we've worked, on this business.
Yeah.
But I think probably the biggest acceleration has been finding the tribe. That's been the thing that has facilitated all of those conversations, facilitated all of those learnings, and facilitated all of that sort of sharing and learning. And probably that was the key moment, if there was one. But that was at the very beginning of the journey, so.
Yeah, and if you were to tell somebody that, and then they're like, okay, Matt, well, I joined a mastermind or a group, I found the tribe, I've been in this for a week now, what the heck, dude, I haven't hit the level of success I'm looking for. And you said it perfectly. It's like you get what you give. And there is that expression, it's like most of life is just showing up, or I don't know how it goes. Well, it's like, okay, step one, show up. Step two, contribute. And just knowing well, people like to think way too logically on business building. Well, if I do A, B, and C in this order, and here's this new strategy, it's guaranteed success. Okay, I'll win the game of business. As opposed to, no, you're gonna show up for your tribe. You're gonna learn from them. You're gonna contribute. You're gonna help out. Well, wait a second. How does that take me from having no clients or having X level of revenue, and my goal is to do triple that? I don't see a direct correlation. Well, it's just there. It's the culmination. It's the running 1 mile a day for 365 days, and then suddenly you're doing way more than what you could ever thought possible. So it's almost like trusting the process and just knowing that stuff is there. But it's easy. It's much easier said than done, and I've seen that
easier. I think I push myself to contribute, and I know the correlation is there. When I contribute more, I definitely get more back in learnings, and what I see, and what I people's responses to questions and things like that. And I see it quite often in our groups, where there's people who are sort of at a different stage in their journey, and they're sort of treating it very much like it's transactional. Okay, I've done this, I've done that, and I'm expecting this to happen, but it's just not happening. And you can sense the frustration that they're not growing at a rate they want to, or they're not at point B, where they're starting at A, they want to get to B, but they're not there yet. And I always try and sort of almost like don't worry, you'll get there. You'll get there. And it isn't all about the transactional stuff. It's about the mindset. It's about this. It's about making sure the transactional stuff is working properly, but it's about mindset. It's about what are your values, understanding where you sit. You know, we try and come, or I always try and come from a place of abundance, and there is more than enough business out there for everybody to make as much money as they need. And without doubt, my customers fit really well with me, but they wouldn't necessarily fit well with somebody else, and vice versa. You know, I look at other agencies in our groups and I think, wow, they're doing well, that's awesome. I'd love to work on clients like that. But the reality is our clients work with us, and that sort of the matchup in values is where it works. And that's where, once you get an understanding of that, and that you have a place in this world to deliver what you are delivering, your clients will find you and you will grow. It's not all about the transactional stuff. And it's, you know, I try and share that with people as much as possible. But, you know,
and you can make the argument that, like, you know, everybody, I think, starting out thinks I'm special, my business is special, whatever. And yeah, it's true. When you get to the point where you're like, yeah, I ain't special at all. I do Facebook ads, I do marketing funnels, I write copy. So does a lot of other people. Well, then you got to think, what do you have that no one else does? And it's the combination of those transactional skills, specialized skills, with your personality, with your core values, with your business values, and how you just treat people. Because that's what people want to make more money with Facebook ads. They also want to feel good about how they're doing it. And so that's where you're in a level that no one can compete with you on, and where you're not just trying to be, I can give you the most value for the least amount of money. Some people can make that work very well, but it's not the only business model out there. And if you're like, no, I charge premium rates. Well, why should I choose you? You're not the cheapest one. Well, it's because here's how I operate. Here's how I treat people. Here's how I take those values and make your experience with us just that much better. Yeah. And so suddenly you're charging things, and people are like, well, people, if you're trying to understand it, you can't, because it's not always logical like that.
No. And I get it. I really do. You know, we've all been there.
Yeah.
And at some point, I've definitely taken on business that wasn't a good fit, and it's the wrong sort of people. But you get to a point where you're working on a piece of business or a client, and the relationship is kind of, it's not where it could be. It's kind of, maybe they're just not a really great fit. But, you know, at a time when you're growing and you early on in your growth area, when cash flow is a big issue, you know, you feel like you want to take those clients on anyway. And you feel like, yeah, but he might be a bit difficult, but I can make it work. You know, I can make a difference to this guy. I'm going to turn him around. He's not going to be that guy having dealt with us. And guess what? They don't, you know. And I suppose you get to the point where you're a certain level of, I suppose, just experience tells you that the best thing to do is to respectfully let those guys go, because they take up so much time. They're inevitably, they're because you're not a good fit, they're never quite happy. And if you were to take the time that you spend on trying to make those guys happy and focus it on finding new business or developing your existing relationships with clients, you know, my experience is that's way more profitable than trying to deal with somebody who just isn't a good fit. So they'll never be totally happy. You know?
No, and it's you can set up all the lines or the barriers or whatever it may be, and say, hey, I do not communicate past 6 p.m. on Monday to Friday. Weekends are off. And even if they may, you know, hopefully you're not giving out your cell phone number anymore. Well, actually, I take that back. My phone number is on my email. People don't often call me, but like I had a client early on where it wasn't the best fit. It was a super short 30-day project. And it's Saturday night at like 8 p.m. And like my phone rings and it's him. I didn't answer it. I didn't even text back, but just seeing it got my blood pressure up.
Yeah.
And just,
life, didn't they?
yeah. And so it's like all those little things that can just, where you're just like, man, fuck this. This is pissing me off. And like, you get that kind of like anger, frustration, whatever. And even if you got the best mindset routine, it's still going to take a lot of effort to get that out. So why deal with that? And then, and when you could even say like, well, that's the logical part of being illogical with it, or being value focused, if it makes sense, or if you're in alignment with those even to begin with.
This is where I think, for me, sticking by your, or even just understanding what your core values are, and, you know, promoting your business based on your core values. If that situation arose where one of our clients was ringing me on Saturday night at 8 o'clock, I would probably pick up the phone, because I share values with those people, and there's a really good chance that would have to be an amazingly sort of outstanding circumstance for them to even consider ringing me. And so, because it's not even written down in our contracts, you know, we don't write in our contracts, we share values, therefore if you ring me, it's really, you know, it has to be really important, because it's unwritten. They understand our values, they respect us, we respect them, and obviously we share those values. So if someone did ring me, I would pick up the phone, because there'd be a really good reason.
That's an interesting point.
You know, if there wasn't, then they're demonstrating that maybe the values aren't quite where we thought they'd be.
But it's almost like when you connect your values on that level, it's like a lot of the stuff that people have set up, it almost becomes a moot point. It's like, I don't even need to talk about that, because we connect on these values, and it's that sub communication. We just know. I found that was very interesting to say, like, yeah, I would pick up, because I would know this. And like that level of insight goes a long way. And not just for that particular scenario, but like for you to solve problems for your client that they don't even know that they have yet. To me, like like running a business, like my previous business, the best thing ever was when an employee said, Paul, here's an issue that I found. And then suddenly I'm like, oh, fuck, an issue. And then here's a solution I found out about too. I'm like, that's actually better than if there's no problem at all. It's like, you found something and solved it for me.
That is so much better. Yeah. Because that's the bit where I suppose we one of the step changes, and you know, and when you start talking about, there are these step changes that happen that help the acceleration and growth of the business. When we brought on board our client services director, client account manager, that started to put some distance between me and the clients. And that was quite hard to let go initially, and quite difficult, because it's always been me. It's always been sort of me growing the business, bringing the clients on board and managing the clients and looking after their every need. So to have that sort of separation was quite difficult. And also, you know, from a point of view of, you know, growing the business, I needed to separate my time so I could focus on the strategy and next steps and So bringing that person on was a really important hire for us, and she's been brilliant in the time she's been with us now. She's been with us about 12 months now. It's been a brilliant 12 months, because initially it was she didn't really understand. Her expertise wasn't Facebook ads. Her expertise is looking after people and making sure clients are happy. And I've known her a while, and I've known that's what she's been great at. So to bring those values on board to our team, we can teach her the Facebook stuff. We can bring on board, we can make sure her knowledge is where it needs to be. It was pretty good, but it just wasn't, you know, so we were able to bring that up to speed. But in the last few months is where we've started to experience a lot more of that. There was a problem, but I've solved it. And that's, this is a dream. This is where we want it to be. So that gives me more confidence to step a little bit further away from the clients, which in turn has helped with our onboarding process, understanding, you know, the transfer over to our client services director, knowing that person is better than I would ever be at client services, hiring for your weaknesses or just making sure you've got good people around you, that person means that our clients are looked after much better than they ever could have been if it was just me. So it all comes back around to values, but having that person in place and enjoying those moments where they've solved a problem before you even know you've got it, it just sort of has helped with our journey along the way,
Yeah, I mean, there's so much that could be said about that with client retention, referrals. I mean,
absolutely, yeah.
Just the ease of work. Like in the end, when work goes right, it's easy, and it does not require 8 to 10 hours a day to do it. When you get like any kind of business and it's just running, you're like, here are the key things that I'm working on. I got other people to do the other stuff. Like that used to kind of mess with me, where I was like, wait a second, I haven't really done anything today. And it's like 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock.
Yeah.
Well, I need to be doing something.
Yeah.
No, sometimes the best thing to do is to make a conscious decision to do nothing, because if you're trying to stay busy and you're trying to just do everything and thinking, well, I'm not going to hire that person, I can easily do it. Well, good luck with that and how to grow a business with it. I am curious. So I want to, as we kind of wrap, and this may not be the case, but I'm always fascinating when someone's gone from a job, especially for as long as you were there, to starting a business. Was there ever any type of time, let's say in the first few months and maybe a year or two, and before I finish the question, I'm going to guess this probably didn't happen because you're an awesome salesperson and you were just hustling and grinding from day one of your website. But was there ever a time when you're like, man, this isn't maybe going as well as I had dreamed it up, when you're talking to friends, family, whoever, and you're thinking, maybe corporate life wasn't all it was cracked up to be, but I was making a lot of money and it was consistent. I was getting a paycheck like clockwork, maybe twice a month, once a month. Was there ever any of that temptation to think, this is good, I'm glad I tried it, but maybe I'll go back to that corporate stuff?
Well, it's interesting you suggest that might never have happened, but it happened all the time. And the only reason for that is I think it's such a different dynamic. And it comes back to, your mindset and your personality and having confidence in yourself. And what I didn't realize had sort of happened so much over my corporate career is that I'd attached my personality to the brands that I was working with. So, we got some, the biggest radio stations in the UK, like Heart FM, Classic FM, Capital FM. They're the big radio brands that dominate the UK. And when you're ringing a new business, when you're ringing somebody and say, hi, I'm from Global Radio and I want to come and talk to you about Heart FM, that opens so many doors. And you put it down to kind of yourself, you don't realize how much of an attachment is that to, oh, this is Global Radio. Of course I want to talk to these guys. I would love to hear my brand on that radio station. So the doors would open. So as much as I was a super successful sales guy in the corporate world, when I was suddenly ringing and saying, hi, this is Matt from Shed Marketing, and nobody had heard of it, I had a huge crisis in confidence, because suddenly it's like, okay, well, it was never me. It was always the radio stations that opened the door. And you start questioning yourself about, well, am I good at sales? Am I good at opening doors? Am I good at having conversations? And it became really difficult. And I just sort of kept, one of the things I have in abundance is resilience. And I just had to keep going and keep going and keep going. And eventually, and I say this is probably like 2 years, 3 years in, you start to get back that sort of, okay, well, I have some identity on my own now. I'm not attaching that to some large corporate brand that everybody knows. Suddenly I'm starting to open doors just because people like me for who I am and what I do and what our values are. And, So you definitely go through, starting a business. I mentioned Kate was working in consultancy for freelance, and we were lucky enough that the work that she was doing was predominantly for a massive global, like it's a global Fortune 500 company. It was based over in France and Germany, in Europe. Great name to have on the books, and they paid well in terms of volume, but they just never paid. They just, these guys, you send in your invoice every 30 days. And I think, at one point they were like 9 or 10 months just haven't paid us, because they're just such a massive company. They just don't need to. So whilst it was, at some point, and they kind of know that they'll probably always pay, but by the time they pay, that what should have been quite a nice payday, you're just paying off all the money you've kind of had to borrow or whatever to over that 9 or 10 month period, and they haven't paid. So we were lucky in that we had that client, but we still needed to make enough money every month to pay the rent, pay the mortgage, whatever, all those things. And we, my daughter's 11 years old now, and so, but she was a lot younger then. And so there's added pressure of that sort of having all the eggs in one basket for Kate and I to be both working. So there was definitely temptation to go back to a corporate lifestyle where, there was a paycheck every month and it was pretty good. But it never felt quite right, and I never did it. So it never, it never really, never bubbled up enough inside me to say, right, I'm going to do that. So
good. Well, I mean, you wouldn't be here.
No, absolutely.
If you had. Yeah. I absolutely love what you said on that confidence thing, and coming from the corporate space, and then suddenly you're Matt from Shed Marketing, and people like, I don't know you, I don't know your company, but and so it's like they treat you differently, and that kind of conflict of identity or crisis of confidence and whatever it may be, you're like, oh wait, did I just like get lucky for all those years? Am I really that good? I've experienced that, and it brought me to a lower place than I've ever experienced. However, I'm insanely grateful for having gone through that, because and you said it perfectly. You're not latching your confidence onto this company, to this business, or even to your paycheck, to anything. When your confidence is attached to yourself, it is the most powerful thing. And the best, like, I've lived the opposite way, where I'm like, okay, I'm confident because of XYZ, or I'm confident because of I've got this business and it's well known, it's doing great in Richmond, Virginia. Now it's like, I'm confident just because I enjoy myself. I enjoy living, and I am confident in the values and being able to speak it. It's awesome. And like, it's just, life's more fun. Business is crushing it. It's just, yeah. Confidence is you latch it onto yourself. You don't latch it onto anything else. And if you can do that, a lot of great things start happening.
And I think that's a great example. When I was saying lots of different things happen over that period of years that contribute to where you are now. And that's why it's difficult to say, oh, it was this and this and this, because there are lots of little things that seem like little things, but that, the self-confidence thing was a big thing that, had a big impact on me and my, lack of confidence at the time. I'd gone from being like the #1 sales guy in the biggest radio group in the UK. I was like, I was untouchable. I was up there, so suddenly I couldn't open a door, I couldn't get through. But that, again, same as you, I'm really grateful for that experience, because that gives me now an inner confidence. And when I'm now talking to people, there's no sort of pretending to be somebody else to try and win the business. We are who we are, and we would love to work with you if you're a good fit. But, equally, if you're not, that's great. Go, respectfully keep looking for your partner. You know,
Yeah.
we had one the other day. It was last week. I was talking to a lady, and she has got a great business, and she wanted us to look after Facebook ads for her. And I was asking her, you know, what's been the problems with your Facebook ads in the past? What do you think has been, you know, the toughest bit for you? And she was explaining that she'd worked with 3 different agencies, and that, you know, she was suing all of those agencies. She was really litigious, and she was kind of basically saying, so I want you to get it right because I'm going to sue you otherwise. It's like, okay, well, I don't need that pressure, so thanks very much, but no thanks. You know, and I think that the confidence to do that comes from a bit of time served, you know, over a certain amount of time, doesn't it, to build up your knowledge and your experience, and just build up your self-confidence to do that, I think.
Yeah, and there's a fundamental feeling of loss. Like I read something, it was like Robert Cialdini's book Influence, maybe something like that, whereas people are more afraid to lose something than to potentially gain. And so when you're looking at opportunities, it doesn't matter if it's an opportunity, money, a car, food, it's, do you have something in your mind? And then the feeling of that being lost is uncomfortable, like to a large degree of level of discomfort. And so being able to deal with that is, do you have the confidence to do that? Do you have the experience to do that? And that's part of your, you know, values, because that's not easy. It's like, okay, well, sure, she was going to sue you if you didn't do it, but if you're not at that level to let it pass, you might be like, you know what, I can do what no one else has. And that sounds courageous. It sounds like you're fighting the good fight, but then sometimes the best thing to do is no. And it's just difficult to get to that point because of our inherent fear of losing things.
Yeah, definitely. Fear of loss is a big thing, isn't it? When I'm talking to people, and when, you know, is one of the big things I talk to is understanding if people are affected by fear of loss, and, you know, it's a real thing, and I think it takes a bit of work to overcome that.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, that's where it's that gut level bit of intuition or that gut feeling of what's going to determine your next action. That's the thing about when you're in business for yourself, like you feel that thing, or you feel all those things to your core. And then is that going to guide your actions to the right place, to being a better business, or is that going to lead you to something negative? And inevitably, you know, negative things will happen. You'll make the wrong decisions and you learn from it. But, you know, you just kind of find like, oh, nothing's going to really like derail me too much, but as long as I'm learning from it, but making that transition from, yes, I'm going to take on every opportunity that comes my way, to I'm going to pick and choose. It's not easy. It's not easy to do.
No, it's not.
Well, we went a little over time, but man, I feel like we could have kept going for another couple hours. Feel almost like we just like scratched the surface. But Matt, dude, this was awesome. Like, I mean, we've chatted before. I've known your story, but it was awesome to hear way more detail and depth. And this was a lot of fun, and tons of gold nuggets of wisdom here.
Well, I really appreciate the inviting me on. It's been a real, you know, bonus for me to do it. I've never done a podcast before. It's my first one, so I really enjoyed it. And it's I think it's, you know, just the process of starting to think about it. It's quite cathartic to say, okay, yeah, let's recognize where we've come from and where we're going and all that kind of thing. You know, there's huge value in it. I've really enjoyed it. And we, as you say, we have some good chats anyway, but yeah, it's good. We should do it again. Yeah,
absolutely. We'll see how, you know, we'll just catch up in a few weeks, and we'll be in the groups, but we always love connecting. And I agree. Like, just looking at it, like, oh wait, like I went through this process myself a couple years ago, or like a year and a half ago. I was like, oh, let me like think of my story. I'm like, oh man, this is like really interesting when I think of it like this. I never pieced together the events of my life like that. And so, like, dude, everyone's got a cool story, I think. So
just finding it, isn't it? And just sort of identifying it. And
yeah.
And it's never my most comfortable space is talking about myself. So
right.
I enjoyed it.
Cool. Well,